I died on Thursday night. Twice. My heart stopped beating while the doctors were trying to save me. My daughter was on a first-class flight to Paris with my credit card, and so was her husband. When my neighbor called, they told her critical condition. He may not make it. She still went, saying the trip couldn't be canceled. 3 days later, I woke up alone in the intensive care unit. No calls, no visitors, just silence. Until I found out what they were really doing in Paris. And when they came home, everything they thought was theirs was gone. I appreciate you stopping by. Let's connect. Leave a comment. Where are you watching, your city or country? It helps me know who's part of this journey. Quick disclaimer, this story blends fictional elements for storytelling and learning. Any parallels to actual names or locations are accidental, but the insight shared is worthwhile. I died on a Thursday evening. Twice, actually. The worst part wasn't the pain of my heart stopping. It wasn't the fear. It was waking up 3 days later and discovering that while doctors were bringing me back from the dead, my daughter was boarding a first-class flight to Paris with my credit card and her husband, and absolutely zero intention of canceling. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love this one. Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm Robert Bryce, 63 years old, Senior Engineering Director at Cascade Energy Systems in Portland, Oregon. I drove a sensible Audi charcoal gray, nothing flashy, and could grill a mean ribeye. Still can actually, though I'll get to that part later. By every measurable standard, I was living a good life. A quiet life. The kind of life you build over 40 years of showing up, doing the work, and taking care of the people you love. I had a house in the Alameda neighborhood, with a view of the mountains on clear days. I had a retirement account that would have made my financial advisor proud. And I had a daughter I'd have done anything for. Had being the operative word. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It was a Thursday in October when everything changed. October 10th, to be exact. One of those typical Portland evenings where the rain starts around 6 and doesn't quit. The kind of night that makes you grateful for a warm house and a pot of coffee that's maybe 1 cup past its prime but still does the job. I was in my home office, same office where I'd worked remotely for the past 5 years. Same desk where I'd helped Renee with her college applications a decade ago, same chair that Margaret used to tell me was going to give me back problems. She'd been right about that. She'd been right about a lot of things. Margaret, my wife. Renee's mother. Gone 3 years now to cancer that didn't care how much time we thought we had left. I pushed the thought away and focused on the spreadsheets in front of me. Retirement planning. The kind of meticulous work that appealed to the engineer in me. I was mapping out the next phase when I'd step down how we'd set up the accounts, what Renee would inherit when the time came. I'd been careful, deliberate. By my calculations, she'd have close to $500,000 between the retirement accounts, the house, and what Margaret had left in her trust. Not bad for a girl whose biggest worry should have been whether she wanted to redecorate her apartment or finally take that trip to Europe she'd been talking about for years. My phone lit up on the desk. A text from Renee. Dad, confirming Paris trip next week. So excited, love you. I smiled. At least I think I smiled. Memory gets fuzzy around the edges when you're about to die. She'd been planning this trip for months. Her and Griffin, her husband of 3 years, the guy who'd swept in during her grief over losing Margaret and promised to take care of her. Investment consultant, he'd said. Entrepreneur. I'd wanted to like him. God knows I'd tried. The text had a heart emoji. 3 of them, actually. I should have been happy for her. I was happy for her. Paris in October, the city of lights. She deserved it. I typed back, "Have a great time, sweetheart. Be safe." That's when the pain started. Not the sharp Hollywood heart attack kind. Not at first. Just a tightness in my chest. Pressure. Like someone had parked a truck on my sternum and forgotten to set the parking brake. I loosened my collar. Took a breath. Probably just stress. I'd been working too hard, that's all. 63 wasn't old, not really, but it wasn't 25 either. Margaret would have told me to take a break, to stop trying to control everything and just breathe. I reached for my coffee mug. The pressure got worse. A lot worse. Suddenly it wasn't pressure anymore. It was pain. Real pain. The kind that makes your vision blur and your hands shake and your brain scream that something is very, very wrong. The mug slipped. I heard it hit the desk, heard the coffee splash across my retirement spreadsheets, heard the ceramic crack. Funny what your brain holds on to when everything's falling apart. I tried to stand. My legs didn't cooperate. I tried to grab my phone. My hand wouldn't close around it. I tried to call out, but there was no one to hear me. Renee had her apartment across town, the one I'd helped with the down payment on, because that's what fathers do. Harold next door was probably watching the news with his hearing aids on the counter, like he always did after 8. The pain spread from my chest, down my left arm, up my neck, into my jaw. My engineering brain, even in crisis mode, recognized the symptoms. Myocardial infarction. Heart attack. This was bad. This was really bad. I went down hard. One knee, then the other, then sideways against the desk chair that Margaret had been right about. The carpet came up fast. I remember thinking it needed vacuuming. Strange the things that matter when you're dying. My phone was 3 feet away. It might as well have been 3 miles. The rain hammered against the windows. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. 40 years I'd lived here. 40 years of memories soaked into these walls. Margaret laughing in the kitchen. Renee's first steps in the hallway. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings and ordinary Tuesday nights that felt like nothing at the time but now seemed like everything. The darkness started closing in from the edges. Not peaceful. Not like they show in movies. Just heavy. Like someone was pulling a thick curtain across my vision 1 inch at a time. My last conscious thought was about Renee. She'd find me. She had to. She'd come by tomorrow like she sometimes did on Friday mornings, with coffee from that place on Fremont she knew I liked. She'd use her key. She'd call 911. She'd hold my hand in the ambulance and tell me I was going to be fine because that's what daughters do. She'd be there. She had to be there. The darkness finished its work. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known as my heart stopped beating in that home office on that rainy Thursday evening, was that my daughter wouldn't find me. She wouldn't even look. But someone else would. Someone I'd waved to for 15 years over hedges and mailboxes and the occasional borrowed lawnmower. Someone I'd exchanged pleasantries with about the weather and the Blazers and whether the city was ever going to fix that pothole on the corner. Someone whose name I knew, but whose character I'd never really needed to test. Not until that Thursday night when my heart decided it was done. Not until the moment when the difference between a neighbor and a friend became the difference between life and death. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. That's the problem with knowing how a story ends. You want to skip to the good parts, to the moment when everything makes sense. Trust me. We'll get there. First, you need to understand what happened in the hours after I hit that carpet. After my phone went dark. After the coffee stopped spreading across my retirement plans. and started soaking into the papers that would have secured my daughter's future. After the last light went out, and the only sound left was the rain on the windows and the settling of an empty house, that's when Harold Miller saved my life. I didn't know any of this until later. Harold told me sitting beside my hospital bed 3 days afterward how he'd been taking out his recycling when he heard the crash. It was Thursday night, 7:45. He remembered the time because Jeopardy had just ended and he was procrastinating on the cardboard breakdown because, in his words, those damn Amazon boxes never fold the way they're supposed to. Harold Miller, 68, retired history teacher from Lincoln High School, where he'd spent 40 years trying to convince teenagers that the past actually mattered. Lived next door for 15 years. We'd done the neighbor thing, borrowed tools, talked about the weather, complained about the city's refusal to fix the pothole on our corner. His wife Emma had passed 5 years back. My Margaret, 3 years ago. We understood each other's silences. Good man. Quiet man. The kind you don't really think about until you need him. He was in his driveway, recycling bin in hand, when he heard it. A heavy crash. Then nothing. Just the rain and the distant hum of traffic on Fremont. Most people would have ignored it, written it off as a raccoon or a branch hitting a window. Harold didn't. He'd been a teacher too long. He knew the difference between normal noise and wrong noise. He looked toward my house. Single light still on in the window. My office. My car in the driveway where it always was. He waited. Listened. No follow-up sounds. No door opening. No lights flickering on. Something prickled at the back of his neck. Teacher instinct, he called it. The same feeling he'd get when a student went too quiet in the back row. He set down the recycling bin and walked across his lawn to my driveway. The rain was coming down harder now. He called out, "Robert, you all right over there?" Nothing. He tried the doorbell. The sound echoed inside the house. No answer. Harold went to the front window and cupped his hand against the glass. Through the gap in the curtains, he could see into my office. He could see me on the floor. He didn't think. He moved. I'd given him a spare key 2 years ago when I had to fly to a conference in Denver. "Just in case," I'd said. "Water the plants if I'm gone more than a week. Make sure the place doesn't burn down." He'd never needed to use it. Until that night. Harold's hands shook as he unlocked the door. The house was too quiet. Too still. He actually ran this 68-year-old man with a bad knee down the hallway to the office. I was on my side against the desk chair. Eyes closed. Lips already starting to turn blue. Harold dropped to his knees beside me, pressed 2 fingers to my neck, searching for a pulse he couldn't find. His teacher training kicked in the CPR certification. The school district made him renew every 2 years, the same training he'd hoped he'd never actually need. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My neighbor, he's collapsed. No pulse. I think it's his heart. What's your location, sir? Harold gave the address. His voice was steady now. 40 years of classroom management will do that, teach you to stay calm when everything's falling apart. I'm starting CPR, he said. Sir, help is on the way. Stay on the line with me. He put the phone on speaker and started compressions. 30 chest compressions. Hard and fast, the way the training videos always showed. 2 rescue breaths. 30 more compressions. His arms burned. His knee screamed. He didn't stop. Come on, Robert, he muttered between compressions. Don't you dare do this. Not on a Thursday. Not in your damn office. He doesn't remember how long he did CPR. Later, the paramedics told him it was 6 minutes. It felt like 6 hours. The sirens came first, then the heavy footsteps. Then suddenly, there were hands pulling him back. Professional voices taking over equipment everywhere. "We've got him, sir. You did good. Step back, please." Harold stumbled backward into the hallway, chest heaving, hands numb. He watched them work. Watched them hook me up to a portable monitor. Watched the line on the screen stay flat and unforgiving. "He's in V-fib," one paramedic called out. "Charging to 200. "Clear." My body jerked. The line stayed flat. Again, "Charging to 300. "Clear." Another jerk. Harold held his breath. And then a blip. Another. "We've got a rhythm. Pulse is weak, but it's there. Let's move. Now." They loaded me onto a stretcher with the efficiency of people who do this every night. IV lines going in. Oxygen masks secured. The lead paramedic was already radioing ahead to OHSU. Harold followed them to the door, soaked in rain and sweat, watching the ambulance lights paint the neighborhood red and blue. One of the paramedics stayed back, a young woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. "You saved his life, sir. That CPR bought him the time he needed." Harold nodded, not quite processing it. "Are you family?" she asked. "No, just his neighbor." "Do you know his next of kin, someone we should call?" Harold thought for a second, then reached into my office and grabbed my phone from the floor. The screen was cracked but still working. The emergency contact info was right there on the lock screen, the way modern phones do it. "His daughter," Harold said. "Renee." He called the number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hi. You've reached Renee. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you." The cheerfulness of it felt obscene. Harold left a message. His voice was tight. "Renee, this is Harold Miller, your father's neighbor. Your dad's had a medical emergency. He's being taken to OHSU. It's serious. Please call me back at this number immediately." He hung up. Tried again 5 minutes later. Voicemail again. And again 10 minutes after that. Voicemail. By the time he locked up my house and drove himself to the hospital, he'd left 3 messages. By morning, when I was in the ICU fighting for my life, when the nurses were whispering about the man who'd coded twice before dawn, when Dr. Rowan was wondering if I'd make it through another hour, by then Renee still hadn't called back. She was busy, you see. She had a flight to catch. I died on a Thursday. Twice. But waking up 3 days later in the ICU at Oregon Health and Science University, I realized the worst part wasn't the dying. It was the silence where my daughter's voice should have been. The ventilator had breathed for me until Friday afternoon. Now, freed from the tube, I could hear everything: the cardiac monitor's persistent beep, the hiss of oxygen through my nasal cannula, the pneumatic sigh of the blood pressure cuff inflating every 15 minutes. Outside my glass-walled room, nurses moved past in a choreographed flow. "Mr. Bryce Robert." A woman's face swam into focus above me, sharp-eyed behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Pamela Rowan. You're at OHSU. You've had 2 cardiac arrests. We've placed 2 stents in your left anterior descending artery. Can you squeeze my hand?" I squeezed. My fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. "Good. You've been sedated since Thursday night. Today is Sunday, October 13th. Her tone was brisk, but not unkind. "Your neighbor, Mr. Miller, has been here quite a bit. He's in the waiting room now if you'd like to see him." Harold, the retired history teacher from next door who always waved when I took out the trash. "My daughter," I croaked. My throat was raw, every syllable scraping. "Renee, is she?" Dr. Rowan's expression shifted, a barely perceptible tightening around her mouth. She glanced at the nurse adjusting my IV, a young woman whose badge read Alasia Santos RN, and something silent passed between them. "Your daughter called yesterday morning," Dr. Rowan said carefully. "She spoke with the charge nurse. She's traveling internationally and won't be able to return for about 10 days. The words landed with the force of a second cardiac arrest. 10 days. I had died twice. Spent 3 days on a ventilator. And my daughter, my only child, the girl I had raised alone after Margaret died, was traveling and couldn't be bothered to come home. She said she'd call back when she could get better reception." Nurse Alicia added her voice too gentle, the kind of gentle that telegraphed pity. "I see," I said. "I didn't see. Not yet. You need to rest," Dr. Rowan said, making a note on her tablet. "The next 72 hours are critical. No stress. Understand?" I nodded. She left, and I was alone with the beeping and the hissing and the terrible silence. 15 minutes later, Harold Miller appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up like I had just returned from the dead. Which technically I had. "Robert." He hurried to my bedside, his eyes damp. "Thank God. I've been praying. I don't even pray, but I've been praying." He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His flannel shirt was wrinkled, his silver hair uncombed. He gripped the bed rail with both hands, and I realized they were shaking. "Harold," I managed, "you saved my life. I just used your spare key and called 911. He sank into the visitor's chair, like a man who had been standing for 3 days straight. "You weren't breathing. Your lips were blue. I started CPR and they talked me through it until the paramedics got there. 12 minutes. 12 minutes. The difference between brain damage and recovery." "Thank you," I said, and the words were pitifully inadequate. We sat in silence for a moment, the monitor beeping a steady 68 beats per minute. "Renee," I said finally, "did you talk to her?" Harold's face closed up. That flicker of pity again. "I called her Thursday night right after they took you into surgery. Left a message. Called again Friday morning. And Friday night." He paused. "She called the nurse's station yesterday morning. Didn't ask to be transferred to your room. Just asked if you were stable, said she was in Paris and couldn't leave right away." Paris. The word detonated in my chest. Paris. The trip she had texted me about Thursday night, minutes before my heart gave out. The trip I had assumed she would cancel. She hadn't canceled. She had called once, confirmed I wasn't dead, and gone back to her vacation. "Robert?" Harold leaned forward. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. The monitor beeped. 70, 71. My heart beating on despite everything. Harold stayed for another hour, talking about nothing. The neighbors, the weather, the blazers filling the silence with gentle noise. When visiting hours ended, he squeezed my shoulder and promised to come back. I watched him go. This man who barely knew me, who had restarted my heart and sat by my bedside for 3 days while my own daughter was sipping wine in the fancy neighborhood in Paris. That night alone in my glass room with the monitors glowing green and red in the dark, I tried to understand. I had given Renee everything. After Margaret died, I had poured my life into her. Postponed retirement, worked extra hours, saved every spare dollar. The college fund, the wedding, the down payment on her condo. $500,000 waiting for her inheritance. And she was in Paris. Nurse Alicia came in at midnight to check my vitals. She worked quietly, but I saw her glance at the empty chair by the bed. "No visitors tonight?" she asked, though she already knew. "My daughter's traveling," I said. She adjusted the IV drip, her face neutral. But I heard it anyway, the thing she didn't say. What kind of daughter doesn't come home when her father dies? Dr. Rowan came by on morning rounds, Monday, her tablet in hand. Your heart function is improving, she said. But I need to ask, is there someone at home who can help you when you're discharged? You'll need supervision for at least 2 weeks. I thought of Renee's voicemail. 10 days. I'll figure it out, I said. Dr. Rowan's eyes lingered on mine for a moment too long, and I saw it, the quiet judgment, the question she was too professional to ask. She made a note and left. I lay there staring at the ceiling tile I had memorized over 3 days and wondered what kind of man raises a daughter who doesn't come when he's dying. The monitor beeped. 72. 73. My heart beating. But something else, something I had believed in for 30 years, had flatlined. On the 4th day, I learned 2 things. First, a stranger's blood was keeping me alive. Second, my daughter had known I was dying and chosen vacation anyway. Dr. Pamela Rowan came by on morning rounds Monday, her tablet tucked under one arm, a paper cup of coffee in the other hand. She looked more rested than she had yesterday, which told me the weekend had been quiet. No codes. No one else dying twice on her watch. You're doing well, she said, pulling up the visitor's chair. Heart rhythms stable. Blood pressures responding to medication. We might move you out of the ICU by Wednesday, if this keeps up. That's good news, I said, though the prospect of leaving this glass room, leaving the monitors that had become my tether to certainty, filled me with a dread I couldn't name. There's something else. Dr. Rowan set down her coffee and met my eyes. You're lucky. Friday night the blood bank was critically low on O negative. We had just enough for your first transfusion, but you needed more after the second surgery. A young man happened to be visiting his grandmother's client in the cardiac wing. He heard the emergency announcement and donated on the spot. I blinked. A stranger, a lawyer actually, young guy, maybe late 20s, said he was O negative and wanted to help. She smiled faintly. We don't get a lot of walk-in donors at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. You're fortunate. Fortunate. The word felt strange. I had died twice, spent 4 days in the ICU, and my daughter was in Paris. But a stranger had saved me. Is he still here? I asked. I'd like to thank him. I'll ask the nurses to check. Dr. Rowan made a note on her tablet, finished her rounds, and left. An hour later, Harold appeared carrying a paper bag from the cafeteria. Smuggling contraband, he announced, setting it on the tray table. Oatmeal cookies. Don't tell Dr. Rowan. You're going to get me kicked out of here, I said, but I took a cookie anyway. Hospital food had all the flavor of cardboard, and the cookie, dense, chewy, studded with raisins, tasted like civilization. Robert, Harold said, settling into the chair with the ease of a man who had spent the last 4 days in that exact spot. There's someone who wants to see you. The guy who donated blood. Before I could respond, a young man appeared in the doorway. Thin, maybe 6 feet tall, with sandy brown hair, and a suit that looked like it had been bought off the clearance rack at Macy's. He held a briefcase in one hand, and had the careful posture of someone who had learned to walk into rooms full of people who underestimated him. Mr. Bryce. His voice was quiet, respectful. I'm Michael Brooks. Brooks. The name hit me like a punch to the sternum. Tom Brooks, I said. I said. Michael's face lit up. You remember? Remember. God, yes, I remembered. Thomas Brooks, a junior engineer at Cascade Energy Systems back in 2009. Brilliant, hard-working, and locked in a custody battle with his ex-wife that was bleeding him dry. He had come to my office one afternoon desperate and asked if I could loan him $15,000 to pay his lawyer. I had written the check that day. Your father, I said slowly. How is he? Michael's expression shifted a flicker of old grief. He passed in 2012. Heart attack. Of course. I had lost touch after Tom left the company in 2010. I had assumed he was living his life somewhere raising his son. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Don't be. Michael set his briefcase down and stepped closer. Dad talked about you until the day he died. He framed your check, never cashed it, just framed it. Wrote on the back, "This man saved my son." He told me that if I ever had the chance to pay it forward, I should. I stared at him. This kid, no, not a kid, a man now had heard my name on an emergency announcement and donated blood because of a check I had written 15 years ago. You saved my life, I said, my voice rough. You saved my childhood. Michael pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the tray table. Dad won the custody case. I grew up with him because of you. If you ever need anything legal, help a ride someone to bring you oatmeal cookies, call me. He shook my hand firm and sure and left. I sat there holding his card, the name embossed in neat black letters, Michael Brooks, Esquire. Brooks and Associates. Family law. Harold was watching me with the kind of expression that teachers wear when they've just witnessed something profound and don't want to ruin it with commentary. Tom's son, I said. Small world, Harold replied. Not small, just, I didn't have the words. Circular, maybe. The universe bending back on itself in a way that made sense only in hindsight. Harold let the silence sit for a moment, then cleared his throat. Robert, he said, I need to tell you something about Renee. My chest tightened. What? Friday morning, when I called her the second time, she picked up. Harold's voice was careful, the way people sound when they're delivering bad news. She asked how serious it was. I told her you'd coded twice and were on a ventilator. She said. He paused, choosing his words. She said the plane tickets were non-refundable, asked if you were stable. I said nothing. Then Saturday afternoon, she texted me. Harold pulled out his phone, scrolled, and handed it to me. The message was bright and cheerful, punctuated with an emoji. Heart glad Dad's stable. I'll call when I'm back. Service here is so spotty. Below it, the timestamp, Saturday, October 12th, 11:47 a.m., and the location tag, Paris Airport, Paris. I stared at the tiny red heart for a long time. Harold sat quietly, the way teachers do when they've just delivered devastating news and know better than to fill the silence. The pain that landed wasn't anger, not yet. It was something quieter, something that settled in my chest right where my heart had stopped twice. It was clarity. They say eavesdroppers never hear anything good about themselves. But what Harold played for me that Tuesday afternoon wasn't eavesdropping. It was evidence. He came in just after lunch, his face set in the grim expression I had come to recognize as his teacher mode, the look he must have worn when delivering bad grades to students who thought they were getting away with something. Robert, he said, closing the door behind him. There's one more thing. I'm not sure I should show you this right now, but show me, I said. He hesitated, then pulled out his tablet and sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. Wednesday night before you collapsed, I was watering the tomatoes on my back deck, he began. Around 8:30, I heard voices coming from your living room, loud enough to carry through the open window. I frowned. I was working in my office. I know. It wasn't you. Harold set the tablet on the tray table but didn't turn it on yet. Later, after everything happened, I remembered your Ring doorbell system. You'd given me access to the app last year so I could keep an eye on the house when you went to Bend for that conference. I did remember. Margaret had insisted on installing the system after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood back in 2022. I was the admin on the account, but I had barely opened the app since she died. Renee knew that. She used to tease me about being technologically hopeless. The system records automatically, Harold continued. Cloud storage. You're the administrator, so everything's saved. I went back and checked the footage because I had a feeling. He paused. I found something from Wednesday night. October 9th, 8:47 p.m. He turned the tablet toward me and pressed play. The screen showed my front porch empty in the amber glow of the porch light. But the audio was clear. The ring had picked up voices from inside just beyond the open living room window. Renee's voice came first, bright and confident. Griffin, I know this sounds heartless, but think about it logically. A man's voice deeper, careful. What if something happens while we're gone? Griffin. I had met him exactly twice. Once at their wedding last year, a small ceremony at the courthouse that Renee had planned in 3 weeks. And once at Thanksgiving where he had spent most of the meal on his phone. Charming enough, forgettable. Renee's laugh light, dismissive. Dad has insurance, whatever happens, we're covered. This Paris trip cost $15,000, Griffin. We can't just throw that money out the window. Dad would want us to go. My chest tightened. The monitor beside me beeped faster. And if it gets serious? Griffin again, uncertain. We'll deal with it when we get back. Renee's tone was the one she used when explaining things to people she considered slower than herself. He's 63, not 90. He'll be fine. This trip is our priority right now. There was a pause, the sound of footsteps, a door closing. Then silence. Harold stopped the recording. I stared at the frozen image of my empty porch. The timestamp glowed in the corner, October 9th, 2024, 8:47 p.m. Less than 24 hours before my heart stopped. They said this, I said slowly, in my living room in front of a camera. I think she assumed you'd never check, Harold said quietly. You told me once you were terrible with technology and didn't know how to use the app. I had said that. Multiple times. Playing the role of the bumbling tech-illiterate dad so convincingly that my own daughter believed I would never think to review the footage. She underestimated the man who paid for the system, I said. Harold's mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. Can I send you this file? Yes. What are you going to do? I looked at him for the long moment. Harold, the man who had saved my life, who had spent 6 days sitting in an ICU waiting room, who had just handed me the most painful piece of information I had ever received. I'm going to think very clearly, I said, for the first time in a long time. Harold sent the file to my phone. I lay there in my hospital bed, the machines beeping their steady rhythm, and listened to it 3 more times. The first time I felt shock. The sharpness of it, the way Renee's voice cut through every assumption I had held about who my daughter was. The second time I felt grief. Not for myself, for the man I had been 2 weeks ago, the fool who had believed his daughter loved him the way he loved her. The third time I felt something else. Something cold and precise. Something that reminded me I had spent 40 years as an engineer solving problems. This was just another problem. It just needed a different kind of solution. I opened my phone and pulled up the file Harold had sent. The audio sat there 17 seconds long, time-stamped and geotagged. Admissible if it came to that. Not that I planned on court. I had never been the type to drag family business into the legal system. But I wasn't the man I had been 2 weeks ago either. I thought about the voice on the recording. Not just the words, though those were damning enough, but the tone, the casual certainty, the laugh. Renee had laughed when she said I would be fine. 23 hours later, I had died. Twice. Dr. Rowan came by for evening rounds and frowned at the monitor. "Your heart rate's elevated," she said. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just thinking." She didn't look convinced, but she made a note on her tablet and left. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the audio file playing on a loop in my mind. Whatever happens, we're covered. He'll be fine. This trip is our priority. I thought about Michael Brooks, who had donated blood because of a check I had written 15 years ago. I thought about Harold, who had broken into my house and restarted my heart. I thought about Margaret, who had spent 30 years building a life with me, and had been dead 3 years before I realized I had been alone long before she left. And I thought about Renee sipping wine in Paris, her phone set to airplane mode, her voicemail full of my neighbor's desperate messages. The monitor beeped. 74. 75. My heart beating. I picked up my phone and opened a new note. At the top, I typed a single word, evidence. Below it, I began a list. By the time the night nurse came in to check my vitals at midnight, I had filled half a page. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger was sloppy emotional, the kind of thing that led to mistakes. What I felt was something Margaret used to call my engineer brain, the cold, methodical, problem-solving mode that had built a 40-year career. Renee thought I was old naive, too grief-stricken to see clearly. She was wrong. And by the time she landed at PDX in 8 days, she was going to find out exactly how wrong. When Harold brought the iPad from my house on Wednesday, he thought I wanted to check my email. He was half right. I did check email, just not mine. "Found this charging on your kitchen counter," Harold said, setting it on the tray table. "Figured you might want to read something. News books, whatever keeps you sane." "Thanks," I said. "You didn't have to go back to the house." "I was watering your plants anyway." He shrugged. "Place feels too quiet. Thought I'd make myself useful." After he left to grab coffee from the cafeteria, I unlocked the iPad. The passcode was still the same, Margaret's birthday, a combination I had never changed. The home screen loaded familiar and ordinary weather app news, a few games Margaret had downloaded years ago that I had never deleted. I opened Safari. A dozen tabs were still open from whenever I had last used it weeks ago. Bank statements, news articles, a half-finished crossword puzzle, and one tab that didn't belong to me. Gmail. Already logged in. But not to my account. The username at the top of the screen read renee.bryce.personal@gmail.com. I stared at it for a long moment, my pulse ticking up. The monitor beside me beeped faster, and I forced myself to breathe slowly. She had borrowed the iPad. I remembered now. 3 months ago, maybe 4. She had come over for dinner, pulled it out to show me photos of Paris hotels. She was considering restaurants Griffin had researched. She had logged into her Gmail to forward me a few links, then left the iPad on the coffee table when she went home. She had never logged out. I sat there, the tablet warm in my hands, and felt the weight of what I was about to do. This was her private email, her correspondence. Reading it would be what snooping, an invasion of privacy. Then I remembered the audio file. "This trip is our priority right now." The laugh in her voice, the casual certainty that I would be fine. "I wasn't trying to spy," I said aloud to no one. It was just there, like she left her diary open on my nightstand. The justification felt thin, but I opened the inbox anyway. The most recent emails were mundane. Promotional messages from airlines. A receipt from a boutique hotel on Central Paris shopping district. A confirmation for a dinner reservation at some Michelin-starred restaurant I couldn't pronounce. Then I saw the thread. 3 weeks old. Subject line: reconsultation request. Asset transfer. I clicked it. The most recent message was from Griffin, forwarded to Renee. His email address was one I didn't recognize, not the casual Gmail he had given me at their wedding, but something corporate-sounding g.sloan.consulting@protonmail.com. The message was short. From Griffin Sloan to Renee Bryce. Date September 28, 2024, 10:34 p.m. Subject: Reconsultation request. Asset transfer. Babe, the meeting's confirmed for October 12th at 2 p.m. Don't mention anything to your dad. Beaumont says we need to be subtle about timing. Renee's reply sent an hour later. From Renee Bryce to Griffin Sloan. Date September 28th, 2024, 11:52 p.m. Subject: Reconsultation request. Asset transfer. I won't say anything. After the trip, we'll tell him it's for our future. He'll understand eventually. I scrolled down to the original email, the one Griffin had forwarded. It was from someone named Frank Beaumont. The signature line listed him as a partner at Beaumont and Partners, a law firm on a law office in downtown Paris in Paris. The email was in English, precise and formal. From Frank Beaumont to Griffin Sloan. Date September 25th, 2024, 3:17 p.m. Subject: Consultation request. Asset transfer. Mr. Sloan, thank you for your inquiry. I can confirm availability for a consultation on October 12th, 2024 at 2 p.m. at our Paris office. As discussed, we specialize in discrete transfers of USS-based assets into offshore accounts for asset protection purposes. Please bring documentation of the properties and accounts in question, as well as any relevant power of attorney paperwork. Our retainer is $10,000 payable upon consultation. Best regards, Frank Beaumont, Esquire. I read it twice, then 3 times. My hands were shaking. The iPad slipped slightly, and I had to grip it harder to keep it steady. This wasn't a vacation. This was theft. They weren't in Paris to see the museum or eat croissants at a sidewalk cafe. They were meeting with a lawyer who specialized in moving American assets offshore. Discrete transfers, asset protection. From me. I looked at the date of the meeting. October 12th, last Saturday, 2 days after I had died. Twice. While I was on a ventilator, Renee and Griffin were sitting in a law office in Paris signing paperwork to steal my life savings. I took screenshots, all of them. The forwarded email, Renee's reply, Griffin's message, Beaumont's original consultation request. I sent them to my own email, then to Harold's, then saved them in 3 separate cloud accounts. Then I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard, the monitor started beeping in alarm. A nurse poked her head in. "Everything okay, Mr. Bryce?" "Fine," I managed. "Just thinking." She frowned at the monitor, adjusted something on the IV stand, and left. Harold came back 10 minutes later carrying 2 cups of coffee. He took one look at my face and set the cups down carefully. "What happened?" I handed him the iPad. He read the email thread in silence, his expression darkening with every line. "Jesus Christ," he said finally. "They're planning to. They're doing it right now," I said. "October 12th. That was last Saturday. They were there, meeting that lawyer." Harold set the iPad down like it might explode. "Robert, you need to call a lawyer. Today. Right now." "No." "What? Not yet." I looked at him, and I could see the shock in his face, not at Renee, but at me, at the tone in my voice. "I need you to not tell anyone about this. Not yet." "Why the hell not?" "Because if I react now, they'll know I found out. They'll cover their tracks. I need to see exactly how deep this goes before I move." Harold stared at me. "You're planning something." "I'm planning to stay alive," I said. "And then I'm planning to make sure they don't get a single dollar." He sat back slowly, studying me. You're not the same guy I pulled off the floor last week." "No," I said. "I'm not." Dr. Rowan came by for evening rounds. She checked the monitors, asked how I was feeling, made notes on her tablet. "You look better," she said. "Color's back. Heart rhythm strong. I think we can move you to a regular room tomorrow and discharge you by the weekend if this holds." "That's good news," I said. "How are you feeling?" "Emotionally, I mean. It's normal to experience depression or anxiety after a cardiac event." I thought about the email on the iPad, the lawyer in Paris, the offshore accounts. My daughter who had laughed when she said I would be fine, who was at that very moment trying to steal everything I had spent 40 years building. "I feel better," I told Dr. Rowan. "Better than I have in years." And it was true. For the first time since Margaret died, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I just needed to make sure I lived long enough to do it. On the 9th day of my recovery, Harold brought me a box from my house. "Important papers," he said, "for the insurance claims." What I found was a document I had forgotten existed, but Margaret hadn't forgotten. He set the cardboard file box on the rolling tray table, the same one that had held tablets and coffee cups, and Michael Brooks's business card over the past week. This time it held something heavier. "Your home office file cabinet," Harold explained. "Second drawer. Figured you'd need insurance documents, property deed, that sort of thing for when you're discharged." "Thank you," I said. "You didn't have to. I know." He waved me off. "But I'm retired and bored, and watering your plants only takes 10 minutes. After he left, I opened the box and began sorting through the contents. Insurance policies neatly labeled in Margaret's careful handwriting. The deed to the house. Retirement account statements. A folder marked medical records that I hadn't opened since Margaret died. Then I found the envelope. It was sealed cream-colored, heavier stock than regular mail. Across the front, in Margaret's unmistakable script, "To Robert, about Renee's trust." My hands stilled. I had opened this envelope once before. 3 years ago, 2 weeks after Margaret's funeral, when I was sorting through her papers in a fog of grief so thick I could barely remember my own name. I had read the letter inside, filed it away, and promptly forgotten about it in the avalanche of widowhood, the condolence cards, the estate paperwork, the endless administrative details of untangling a 30-year marriage. Now, holding it again, I felt my pulse quicken. I pulled out the letter. 2 pages handwritten on Margaret's personal stationery, the kind with her monogram embossed at the top. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but the ink was still sharp. "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope I was wrong about what I'm about to write. I've set aside $250,000 for Renee from my inheritance. But it comes with a condition. She only gets it if she's there for you when you need her. When you're sick. When you're vulnerable. The trust has a trigger clause. A medical emergency requiring hospitalization will activate an evaluation period. If she shows up and cares for you, she inherits. If she's absent without an extraordinary justification, the money reverts to you. I pray I'm wrong about her. I pray that when the time comes, she'll prove me a paranoid dying woman who saw shadows where there was only light. But if I'm right, if she fails this test, then please, Robert, protect yourself. The trust is managed by Lawrence Webb at Cascade Estate Planning. He has the full documentation. The trigger is automatic. You don't have to do anything except tell him what happened. I know you'll think this is cruel. You'll say I didn't give her a chance. But darling, I watched her change over the last 5 years. I watched her grow distant, watched the way she looked at your retirement account statements when she thought no one was paying attention. I watched Griffin charm his way into her life 6 months after we learned I was terminal, and I saw the way he calculated. I'm not punishing her. I'm testing her. If she loves you, she'll pass. If she doesn't, you deserve to know. I love you. I'm sorry I won't be there to hold your hand through whatever comes next. Forever yours, Margaret. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I set it down on the tray table and cried. Not for myself, for Margaret. For the loneliness she must have felt lying in that hospice bed, watching our daughter drift away, and knowing that I was too blind with love to see it. She had seen what I refused to see. The cardiac monitor beeped steadily. 72. 74. My patched-together heart beating on. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and reached back into the box. There, beneath the insurance policies, was a leather portfolio embossed with the logo of Cascade Estate Planning. Inside the trust document, I scanned the pages, my engineer's brain parsing the legal language. Article 4, Conditional Inheritance Provisions. The sum of $250,000 from the estate of Margaret Elizabeth Bryce shall be held in trust for the benefit of Renee Margaret Bryce, subject to the following conditions. In the event of a medical emergency requiring hospitalization of the grantor's spouse, Robert James Bryce, the trustee, shall evaluate whether the beneficiary provides reasonable care and presence during said emergency. B. Reasonable care and presence is defined as physical presence within 48 hours of notification, regular visitation, and demonstrated concern for the welfare of Robert James Bryce. C. Failure to meet these conditions without extraordinary justification, as determined by the trustee in consultation with medical professionals, shall result in the forfeiture of the inheritance, with funds reverting to Robert James Bryce. I sat back, the document trembling in my hands. Margaret had built a test, a simple, elegant, devastating test, and Renee had failed it spectacularly. 48 hours. Margaret had given her 48 hours to show up. Renee hadn't come in 9 days. She had called once, confirmed I wasn't dead, and gone back to her vacation. No, not vacation. Her heist. I thought about the audio recording, the iPad email, the lawyer in Paris, Renee and Griffin sitting in Frank Beaumont's office while I was on a ventilator planning to move my assets offshore. And all the while she had been forfeiting $250,000 because she couldn't be bothered to get on a plane. The irony was so sharp, it cut. I picked up my phone and found Lawrence Webb's contact information in the trust document. I had met him once briefly at Margaret's funeral. A serious man in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of calm authority that came from 40 years of estate law. I sent him an email. Subject: Margaret Bryce Trust. Trigger event. Mr. Webb. I was hospitalized on October 10th with a cardiac emergency, 2 arrests, ICU ventilator. Renee was notified by my neighbor within hours. She is currently in Paris and has not visited or provided care. Please contact me to discuss next steps. Robert Bryce. I hit send. The response came back in less than 10 minutes. Subject: Margaret Bryce Trust. Trigger event: Mr. Bryce. I'm deeply sorry to hear about your health crisis. I'm relieved you're recovering. Per the terms of the trust, I will need documentation, hospital admission records, proof of notification to Renee, and a statement from you confirming her absence. If the conditions are met, the $250,000 will revert to your estate within 30 days. I'll call you Monday morning to begin the process. Best regards, Lawrence Webb, Esquire. I set the phone down and picked up Margaret's letter again, pressing it to my chest, right where my heart had stopped twice. She had known. 3 years ago, lying in that hospice bed watching Renee grow cold and distant, she had known. And she had tried to protect me from the future I was living right now. The money didn't matter. The test did. Renee had failed it catastrophically, and Margaret, my brilliant, heartbroken wife, had made sure there would be consequences. Harold Miller had been a history teacher for 40 years. Researching people was his second nature. What he found about Griffin Sloane made my daughter's betrayal look like child's play. I was staying at Harold's house under doctor's orders. "You can't be alone for at least 2 weeks," Dr. Rowan had said when she discharged me Saturday morning. "You need someone who can monitor you, drive you to follow-up appointments, call 911 if something goes wrong." Harold had volunteered before I could even ask. "I've got a guest room and nothing but time," he'd said. "Besides, your house feels like a crime scene right now. You don't need to be there yet." So I moved into the small blue Craftsman next door, the one I had waved at for 15 years, without ever stepping inside. Harold's late wife's quilts still hung on the walls. Her books still lined the shelves. It smelled like coffee and old paper, and it felt safer than anywhere I had been in weeks. Sunday afternoon, Harold came into the guest room carrying his laptop and a manila folder. His expression was the one I imagined he wore when teaching students about the fall of Rome, grim, factual, preparing them for something ugly. "Robert," he said, sitting down in the armchair by the window. "I did some digging. Called in a favor from a former student who's a private investigator now." I sat up straighter, my chest aching slightly from the movement. About Griffin. Harold opened the laptop and turned it toward me. "What I found, Robert, this is worse than we thought." He pulled up a PDF, a professional background report, the kind with public records, court filings, and cross-referenced databases. At the top, a photo of Griffin, the same charming smile I remembered from Thanksgiving, the same carefully styled hair. But the name beneath it read Griffin Michael Sloane. "Sloane," I said, "with an E. He changed it 5 years ago. Legal name change in Cook County, Illinois. Dropped the E, moved to Oregon, started fresh." Harold scrolled down. "Age 38. Not 35 like he told Renee." I felt my jaw tighten. 3 years. Small lies, but deliberate ones. Harold clicked to the next page. Marriage history. 2 entries. Marriage 1, Angela Carter, age 52, married. March 2017 to September 2018, 18 months. Context. Widow husband died of cancer 6 months prior. Met Griffin at a grief support group in Chicago. Financial loss, $80,000 in loans for a business venture that never materialized. Civil suit filed. Griffin disappeared before judgment. Marriage 2, Patricia Kemp, age 49, married. November 2019 to January 2021, 14 months. Context, divorced, met Griffin at a financial planning seminar in Portland. Legal action, restraining order filed for financial abuse. Allegations include unauthorized credit card charges, forged signatures on loan documents. Griffin left the state. I stared at the screen, my hands gripping the edge of the laptop. "He's a professional," Harold said quietly. "He targets vulnerable women, widows, divorcees, women who are grieving or rebuilding. He marries them, drains their accounts, and disappears." "Renee," I said, my voice hoarse. "He targeted her." 3 months after Margaret's funeral, Harold confirmed. I found the listing for the grief support group Healing Hearts, a community center in southeast Portland. Griffin attended as a facilitator. Renee went there trying to process losing her mom. I closed my eyes. I had encouraged her to go. "You need support," I had told her. "Don't grieve alone." And she had walked straight into the arms of a predator. "But Robert," Harold's voice pulled me back. "She's not just a victim anymore." He pulled up the audio file, the one from the Ring camera. Renee's voice, bright and certain. "This trip is our priority right now." "She knows what she's doing," Harold said. Maybe she started as his mark, but she's complicit now. That email thread, the meeting with Beaumont, she's in on it. I nodded slowly. Renee was both. Victim 3 years ago. Accomplice now. What do you want to do? Harold asked. I looked at the background report. 2 women, both left financially devastated. Angela Carter had lost her late husband's life insurance payout. Patricia Kemp had filed for bankruptcy. And now Griffin had set his sights on me. Or rather, on the $500,000 I had saved for Renee. The house. The retirement accounts. I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else, I said. Harold studied me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. There's one more thing. He opened Instagram and turned the screen toward me. The post was from 2 days ago. A photo of Renee and Griffin at a rooftop bar, champagne flutes, raised the Eiffel Tower glowing in the background. Renee wore a dress I didn't recognize, designer, probably expensive. Griffin had his arm around her, his smile wide and easy. The caption read, "Living our best life," below it. A geotag, the Grand Meridian Hotel, Paris. 2 Central Paris shopping district. I pulled up a map on my phone. The Grand Meridian Hotel was 2 blocks from Beaumont's law office. They had the meeting, I said. They did. Harold closed the laptop. The plan's in motion. Whatever paperwork Beaumont drew up, they signed it. I sat back, my heart rate ticking up. The monitor Dr. Rowan had sent home with me, a temporary wearable device, buzzed softly on my wrist, reminding me to stay calm. I ignored it. Griffin Sloan, I said, testing the name. Investment consultant with no credentials. Serial marriage fraud. Offshore account specialist. Harold nodded. I thought about the email. Asset protection. The kind of phrase that sounded legitimate until you looked closer. The kind of thing that would interest the IRS or the FBI. Harold, I said slowly. How good is your PI friend? Very good. Why? I need everything. Every court filing, every lawsuit, every alias Griffin's ever used, credit history, known associates, bank accounts if he can find them. Harold raised an eyebrows. You're building a case. I'm building a weapon. I met his eyes. And then I'm making a few phone calls. Harold smiled, the kind of smile that probably terrified his students when they plagiarized papers. I'll have the full report by tomorrow. That night, I lay in Harold's guest room, staring at the ceiling, the wearable monitor tracking my heart rate in real time. 76, 78, 80. I thought about Angela Carter, who had trusted a man she met in a grief support group and lost her husband's life insurance. I thought about Patricia Kemp, who had filed a restraining order and watched Griffin vanish. I thought about Renee, my daughter, who had started as Griffin's victim and ended as his accomplice. And I thought about the plan that was forming in my mind, piece by piece, like the engineering diagrams I used to draw at Cascade Energy Systems. They had 9 days in Paris. 9 days to toast their success, to believe they had gotten away with it. What they didn't know was that the man whose money they were spending had also had 9 days. 9 days in a hospital bed with nothing to do but think. And unlike their plan, mine would actually work. Lawrence Webb had handled estate law for 35 years. He told me later that he had seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. But even he raised his eyebrows when I played the audio recording and showed him the emails. Harold drove me to the law office Monday morning. I still wasn't cleared to drive. Dr. Rowan's orders were strict: no driving for 2 weeks, no stress, no heavy lifting. Harold had taken the role of chauffeur and bodyguard, with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent 40 years managing teenagers. Lawrence Webb's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in downtown Portland, the kind of place that smelled like old books and furniture polish. Webb himself was in his mid-60s, silver-haired, with the kind of measured calm that came from decades of navigating ugly family disputes. He shook my hand carefully, as if he could tell I was still fragile. "Mr. Bryce," he said, "Margaret spoke very highly of you. I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances. Thank you." I sat down across from his desk, Harold taking the chair beside me. "Mr. Webb, I need to protect my assets, immediately and discreetly." Webb folded his hands on the desk. "Tell me everything." I did. I played the Ring doorbell recording. I showed him the email thread with Frank Beaumont. I handed him Harold's PI report on Griffin Sloan. The name changes, the previous marriages, the pattern of financial abuse. And I showed him Margaret's letter and the trust document with its failed conditional clause. Webb listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad in neat, precise handwriting. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me for a long moment. "You want to disinherit your only child and report her husband for fraud," he said. "I want to protect myself," I corrected, "and honor my wife's wishes." Webb nodded slowly. "Then let's talk about options." He pulled out a whiteboard, the kind lawyers use to diagram complex estates, and began writing. "Option 1, will amendment." He wrote it at the top. "We add a disinheritance clause. Clean, straightforward, but contestable. If Renee sues, a court might decide you were acting under duress or undue influence from—" He glanced at Harold. "A neighbor." "I'm not under duress," I said. "I know, but a good lawyer could argue it." "Next option." He wrote again. "Irrevocable living trust. You transfer your assets, house, retirement accounts, savings into a trust. The assets are no longer in your name. You're the trustee, so you control them while you're alive. When you die, they pass directly to the beneficiaries you name. Bypasses probate entirely. Meaning Renee can't contest it. Meaning there's nothing to contest. She has no legal claim to assets that aren't part of your estate." Webb tapped the board. "Oregon doesn't have filial inheritance rights. Children only inherit if they're named. She can't sue for something that was never hers." I felt a small, cold satisfaction settle in my chest. "Option 3, declaration of disinheritance." Webb wrote it beneath the others. "A formal, notarized document stating your intent. We attach it to your will and the trust. It creates a paper trail proof that this was your decision made with full capacity and legal counsel." "And option 4, I asked. Webb looked at the PI report, then at the email from Beaumont. "IRS whistleblower tip." He said it quietly, like the words carried weight. "Offshore asset transfers to evade taxes are federal crimes. If Griffin is moving your money into foreign accounts, that's conspiracy to commit tax fraud. Add in elder financial abuse, exploiting someone during a medical crisis, and you're looking at serious charges." Harold let out a low whistle. "I want all of it," I said. "Trust, disinheritance, IRS report. Everything." Webb studied me. "That's scorched earth, Mr. Bryce. There's no going back from this." "I know." He nodded once, then turned back to the board. "Let's talk about the credit card." I blinked. "What about it?" "You said Renee has a credit card, supplemental card on your account." "Yes. I added her 3 years ago and after she got married, for emergencies." "How much has she spent in the last 2 weeks?" I pulled up my banking app. The charges were staggering. Hotels, restaurants, designer boutiques. A single purchase at a designer boutique for $9,000. $47,000, I said, my voice flat. "Since October 10th, the day I died." Webb made a note. "Here's what we do. Don't cancel the card yet. Let her keep spending. Document every charge. Then once you're ready, we file a dispute with the bank." "For what?" "Fraudulent charges during medical incapacity." Webb leaned back. You were incapacitated from October 10th through the 18th. Unconscious on a ventilator, unable to authorize transactions. Any charges made during that time by a supplemental card holder, especially luxury purchases unrelated to your care, can be disputed as unauthorized. I stared at him. The bank will transfer the debt to her if we provide medical records proving incapacity, yes. The bank reassigns liability to the person who made the charges. Webb smiled faintly. It's not revenge. It's accurate accounting. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Something colder. Precision. All right, I said. Trust disinheritance IRS tip credit card dispute. How long, Kisson? 3 weeks to finalize the trust. The IRS tip I can submit this week. Credit card dispute we file after she's back and has spent everything she's going to spend. They're coming home Wednesday, I said. When they walk through that door, I want everything in place, not to argue, to present facts. Webb pulled out a legal pad and began drafting. The trust will be called the Miller-Brooks Family Trust. He glanced at Harold, then at me. Beneficiaries, Harold Miller and Michael Brooks, I said. Equal shares. Harold's head snapped toward me. Robert, you saved my life, I said. Michael gave me his blood. You're my family, not Renee. Webb wrote it down without comment. Margaret's $250,000 into the trust, along with everything else. Webb worked in silence for 10 minutes, drafting documents, checking statutes, making notes. Finally, he slid a power of attorney form across the desk. This authorizes me to begin the trust formation, he said. Once you sign, it's the point of no return. I picked up the pen and signed. When Harold and I left the office, my phone buzzed. A text from Renee. Dad, having the most amazing time. Paris is beautiful. Can't wait to tell you all about it. Home Wednesday. Love you so much. I showed it to Harold. He grimaced. I didn't. I typed back. Can't wait to see you too, sweetheart. We'll have a lot to talk about. I hit send. Harold glanced at me. You really meant that? Every word, I said. They landed at PDX Wednesday evening, tanned and laughing, completely unaware that the house they were returning to no longer belonged to them. Legally, anyway. I waited in the living room, the same spot where I had collapsed 13 days ago. My chest ached slightly, phantom pain, Dr. Rowan had called it. The body remembering trauma, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. I had rehearsed this. The sound of a car in the driveway, doors slamming, luggage wheels on the walkway. Then Renee's voice, bright and familiar. Dad, we're home. The front door burst open, and she rushed in, arms wide. She looked good, rested. Her skin was sun-kissed, her hair lighter than I remembered. She wore a linen jacket I didn't recognize, expensive, probably bought on one of Paris's luxury shopping streets with my credit card. She threw her arms around me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt her weight against my chest. I hugged her back, tightly, like I meant it. Welcome home, sweetheart, I said. I missed you. She pulled back, her eyes scanning my face. Dad, you look amazing. I was so worried, but God, you really do look good. Modern medicine, I said, smiling. They patched me up pretty well. Griffin appeared at the doorway behind her, hauling 2 suitcases with designer logos I didn't recognize. He looked well-fed and self-satisfied, his smile as wide and easy as ever. Robert. He set the luggage down and crossed the room to shake my hand. His grip was firm, confident. So glad to see you're doing better. Heard you had quite a scare. Quite a scare, I repeated, keeping my smile steady. That's one way to put it. Griffin laughed, oblivious. Well, you look great. Seriously. I'd never guess you just got out of the hospital. Thank you. I gestured to the couch. Sit, sit. Tell me about Paris. I want to hear everything. Renee dropped onto the couch, pulling out her phone immediately. Oh my God. Dad, it was incredible. The Eiffel Tower at sunset. We got this amazing photo look. She scrolled through her camera roll, and I leaned in watching. Photo after photo. Champagne flutes on a rooftop bar. Designer shopping bags lined up on a hotel bed. A selfie of Renee and Griffin in front of the famous Paris landmark, both grinning like lottery winners. Looks expensive, I said mildly. Did you enjoy it? It was worth every penny, Griffin said, settling into the armchair across from me. He stretched his legs out, utterly relaxed. We figured you know life's short. You only live once, right? I met his eyes. That's true. You only live once. He didn't catch the edge in my voice. Renee didn't either. She was still scrolling, narrating their trip in breathless detail. And the food, Dad, oh my God, the food. We went to this 3-Michelin-star place and the tasting menu was like 18 courses. I've never eaten anything like it. Sounds wonderful, I said. I'm glad you had such a good time. She paused, her smile faltering slightly. You look really good, Dad. The hospital took good care of you. They did. I agreed. And Harold, he was there every day, sat in the ICU waiting room for hours. A flicker of something crossed her face. Guilt, maybe, or just discomfort. I wanted to come right away, she said quickly. But the plane tickets were non-refundable, and by the time Harold called we were already non-refundable, I said, my voice calm. I know. You told Harold. The air in the room shifted just slightly. Renee's smile tightened. Griffin's eyes flicked between us, alert now. I broke the tension with a smile. I'm just glad you're home safe. Let's not dwell on it. How about dinner this weekend? I want to hear more stories properly. Not just a quick recap. Renee's shoulders relaxed. That sounds great, Saturday. Saturday works. I nodded. Your favorite restaurant, that Italian place on Division. Griffin leaned forward. Actually, we were thinking maybe we could cook here, keep it cozy. You probably don't want to be out at a crowded restaurant so soon after everything. I studied him. His expression was earnest, concerned. But there was something else beneath it. Control. He wanted this on his terms in my house where he could manage the conversation. My place it is then, I said. I'll get the wine. Perfect. Griffin stood, pulling Renee up with him. We should get going. Jet lag's hitting hard. But we'll bring everything Saturday. You just rest. I've been resting for 2 weeks, I said. I'm ready. They gathered their luggage, Renee giving me one more hug at the door. I'm really glad you're okay, Dad, she said, her voice softer now, almost sincere. Me too, sweetheart. I watched them drive away back to the condo. I had helped them buy, the one where I had contributed $20,000 to the down payment 3 years ago. When their taillights disappeared around the corner, I closed the door and stood alone in the living room. The same room where the Ring camera had recorded their conversation. This trip is our priority. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of whiskey. Scotch. Whiskey 16-year, the bottle Margaret had bought me for our 30th anniversary. I wasn't supposed to drink on the medications Dr. Rowan had prescribed, but I needed this. I pulled out my phone and texted Lawrence Webb. Saturday dinner. They're coming here. Everything ready by Friday. The reply came within seconds. Done. Documents finalized Thursday. Your move, Robert. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Margaret and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 30 years, and raised my glass to the empty room. "To Saturday," I said aloud. "The day my daughter learns what truly non-refundable means." I took a sip. The whiskey burned smooth and peaty, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something other than grief. I felt ready. They arrived at 6:03, fashionably late, carrying a bottle of wine they had bought with my credit card. I knew this because I had checked the statement every day that week. An expensive red wine, $78 purchased at a boutique wine shop in Northwest Portland on Thursday afternoon. I hadn't said anything about it. Not yet. The doorbell rang. I opened the door and smiled. "Dad?" Renee rushed forward, kissing my cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume, something new, probably also on my card. "It smells amazing in here." "What are you making?" "Beef stew," I said. "Your mother's recipe." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe. Or just surprise that I had remembered. Griffin stepped in behind her, holding up the wine bottle like a trophy. "We brought red wine, thought it might pair well." He grinned, that easy, charming smile that had probably worked on Angela Carter and Patricia Kemp before Renee. "Only the best for you, Robert." "How thoughtful," I said, taking the bottle. I didn't mention that I recognized the charge. Not yet. I led them into the living room. Griffin settled into the armchair, my armchair, the one I had sat in for 20 years, and stretched out like he owned the place. Renee perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous. "Good." "So," Griffin said, leaning forward, "how are you feeling, really feeling? You look incredible for someone who just—" He caught himself. "Went through what you did." "I feel different," I said. "Clearer." "That's great." Griffin's enthusiasm was almost convincing. Near-death experiences can really put things in perspective, right? Make you think about what's important. "Exactly," I said. "Speaking of which, tell me more about Paris. I want to hear everything. Where did you stay?" Renee brightened. "The Windsor Grand Hotel. It was beautiful, Dad. The suite had a balcony overlooking the gardens." "Sounds expensive." "It was worth it," Griffin said quickly. "We figured life's short. Treat yourself." "Near which shopping district?" I asked. Griffin didn't hesitate. "A luxury shopping street. High-end stuff. I did some serious damage to the card there." He laughed, nudging Renee. "Your daughter has excellent taste." "I'm sure you did," I said evenly. Renee shot Griffin a look. He didn't catch it. "Come on," I said, standing. "Dinner's ready." I had set the table carefully. 3 places. White linen napkins Margaret had bought years ago. The good china. Candles. A manila folder sat at my seat, just visible at the edge of my placemat. Neither of them noticed it yet. I served the beef stew, poured wine, the $78 red wine Griffin had bought with my money, and sat down at the head of the table. Renee watched me dish out the food. "Dad, you didn't have to go to all this trouble. You're still recovering." "I wanted to," I said. "One last family dinner." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Last." "Dad, what are you—" "Poor word choice," I interrupted smoothly. "I mean, before I start a new chapter of my life." Griffin perked up. "New chapter, retirement plans." Something like that. I cut into my beef, taking my time. "That's what I wanted to talk about tonight. Plans. The future. Estate matters." Both of them leaned forward slightly. I saw it, the quickening interest, the flash of calculation in Griffin's eyes. They thought this was inheritance talk. They thought I was about to hand them the keys to everything. "But first," I said, setting down my fork, "I'm curious. Did you handle any business while you were in Paris? Silence. Renee blinked. Business, no, Dad. It was just a vacation. No meetings, no appointments. Griffin shifted in his chair. What kind of appointments? I shrugged. I don't know. Legal consultations, financial planning, that sort of thing. Renee's face went carefully blank. No, nothing like that. Why would we? No reason. I picked up my fork again. Just seemed like an odd time to travel right after I nearly died. I thought maybe you had something pressing. Something that couldn't wait. Griffin's laugh was too loud. Robert, come on. We just needed a break. Stress relief, you understand. I do, I said. Completely. The meal continued. I asked about the museum, about the restaurants, about the hotel. Renee answered in careful detail, her voice bright, but her eyes watching me like I was a trap waiting to spring. Griffin kept talking, filling silences with anecdotes that sounded rehearsed, and I watched them both. Renee's fingers drummed against her wine glass. She kept glancing at me, then away. She sensed something. Not the specifics, but the shape of danger. Griffin, on the other hand, was still performing, still playing the charming son-in-law. But I saw the way his eyes flicked to the manila folder at my place. Once. Twice. I caught Renee staring at me. Something wrong? She hesitated. You just seem different. I am different, I said. Dying twice changes a person. Guilt flickered across her face, quick and sharp. She looked away. Griffin, oblivious, raised his glass. Well, here's to recovery and to new chapters. I didn't toast. I set my fork down and folded my hands on the table. Griffin, I said, let me ask you something. Sure. His smile was wide, easy. Anything. What exactly do you do for a living? The room went still. Griffin's smile didn't fade immediately, but something behind his eyes did. A calculation. A reassessment. The exact moment a con artist realizes the mark isn't a mark anymore. Renee's hand tightened on her wine glass, her knuckles going white, and I sat there at the head of the table, in my house, in my life, and waited. Because in chess, the patient one controls the board. Saturday dinner ended at exactly 7:41 p.m. I remember because the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, just as Griffin reached for his wine glass, again relaxed, and smiling, completely unaware that his life was about to split in half. Renee was halfway through a story about a rooftop restaurant in Paris when I finally picked up the manila folder beside my plate. The room went quiet immediately. Even Griffin noticed the shift. What's that? He asked lightly. Paperwork, I said. Important paperwork. Renee forced a smile. Dad, if this is about estate planning, maybe we should do it another night. You still look tired. I am tired, I said calmly. Tired enough to finally stop lying to myself. Her expression faltered. I opened the folder slowly and pulled out several printed bank statements. I slid them across the table toward Griffin. $47,312. Hotels, jewelry, designer boutiques, Michelin-starred restaurants. Every charge highlighted in yellow. Griffin glanced down, then shrugged. Robert, you told Renee to enjoy the trip. I told her to enjoy Paris, I replied. I didn't tell her to spend money while I was unconscious on a ventilator. Silence. Renee looked at the statements, her face draining of color. Dad, we were going to pay you back. With what money? Neither of them answered. I reached into the folder again and pulled out another sheet of paper. A printed screenshot. The email from Frank Beaumont. Griffin froze instantly. For the first time since arriving, his confidence cracked. Renee looked from the paper to me. "Dad?" "No," I interrupted softly. "You're going to listen now." I laid the screenshots across the table one by one. The offshore consultation, the asset transfer discussion, Griffin's message telling Renee not to tell me. Renee stared at the papers like they were radioactive. Griffin recovered first. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I asked. "Then explain it." "It's asset protection strategy," he said quickly. "International diversification, that's all. For assets that don't belong to you." His jaw tightened. I leaned back slowly, ignoring the ache spreading through my chest. The wearable monitor on my wrist vibrated softly, warning me my heart rate was climbing. I ignored that too. "You know what the interesting part is?" I asked. None of this even made me angrier than what came next. Renee swallowed hard. "Dad, please." I picked up my phone and pressed play. Her own voice filled the dining room. "Dad has insurance. Whatever happens, we're covered. Then this trip is our priority right now." And finally the laugh. That soft, dismissive laugh that had replayed in my head every night since the ICU. The recording ended. Nobody moved. Renee looked physically sick. Griffin stared at the table. Outside rain tapped softly against the windows, just like the night my heart stopped. "I died twice," I said quietly. "And while doctors were shocking my heart back to life, you two were worried about champagne bars and offshore accounts." "Dad, I was scared," Renee whispered. "You were in Paris." Tears welled in her eyes. "Griffin told me you were stable." I looked at Griffin. There it was. The first real crack between them. He noticed it too. "Renee, don't do that," he snapped quietly. "Don't do what?" she shot back suddenly. "Tell the truth." Griffin's mask slipped, only for a second. But I saw the coldness underneath, the calculation, the same thing Margaret had seen before she died. I opened the folder one last time and removed a cream-colored envelope. Renee recognized her mother's handwriting instantly. Her face collapsed. "No," she whispered. "Your mother wrote this 3 years ago," I said, "before she died." I handed her the trust document. She read the highlighted section twice before understanding it. 48 hours. Presence during hospitalization. Failure results in forfeiture. Her inheritance gone. The color vanished completely from her face. "Dad," her voice broke. "You took Mom's money away from me." "No," I said. "Your mother did." The room felt smaller now, tighter. Even Griffin looked shaken. "And that's not all," I continued. "This house, my retirement accounts, my investments, they're no longer part of my estate." Griffin looked up sharply. I almost smiled. "The trust was finalized yesterday morning," I said. "Everything has been transferred." "Transferred to who?" Griffin demanded. "People who showed up when I died." Silence. Harold's name wasn't necessary. Neither was Michael's. They understood. Griffin stood abruptly. "This is insane." "No," I said evenly. "This is consequences." He grabbed Renee's arm. "We're leaving." But she didn't move. She just stared at the papers in front of her, breathing unevenly. Then her phone buzzed. Once. Twice. 3 times. She looked down automatically. Her expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. "What?" Griffin asked sharply. She looked up slowly. "The credit cards." I nodded. All disputed, I said calmly. The bank received my medical records yesterday morning. Every charge made while I was incapacitated is now your liability. Griffin went pale. Additionally, I continued, my attorney forwarded copies of your Paris consultation to federal investigators this afternoon. Apparently, the IRS takes a dim view of offshore asset discussions involving medically incapacitated account holders. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the grandfather clock ticking steadily in the hallway. Finally, Renee looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Dad, please. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not grief, not even satisfaction. Just clarity. I stood slowly from the table, one hand against my chest. The man who died in this house 2 weeks ago would have forgiven you, I said quietly. I looked at Griffin, then at my daughter. But he didn't survive. Before I reveal what's inside that manila folder, comment 13 if you think you know what's about to happen. Quick note, the next part contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here. Griffin tried to answer my question about his occupation. He tried for 30 seconds, his mouth opening and closing, words forming and dying before they reached sound. Then I reached for the manila folder and said, "Let me help you with that." I opened it slowly, deliberately, and pulled out my tablet. The screen glowed in the candlelight, casting shadows across the dinner plates we hadn't finished. Renee's voice was tight. "Dad, what is that?" I didn't answer her. I kept my eyes on Griffin. "Where were we? Oh, right. Your profession." Griffin cleared his throat. "I'm a consultant, investment advisor. I help people manage their portfolios, plan for retirement." "Right," I said. "No credentials, no licenses, but you do have 2 prior marriages, both to women old enough to be Renee's mother. Angela Carter, 52, Patricia Kemp, 49. Both marriages ended with allegations of financial fraud. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" The color drained from Griffin's face, not gradually all at once like someone had pulled a plug. Renee turned to him, her brow furrowed. "What, Griffin? What is he talking about?" Griffin's eyes darted between us. "Robert, I don't know where you got this information, but Angela Carter," I repeated, my voice even. "You married her 18 months after her husband died of cancer. Borrowed $80,000 for a business venture that never materialized. She filed a civil suit. You disappeared before the judgment." I paused. "Patricia Kemp. Met at a financial planning seminar. Married 14 months. Restraining order for financial abuse. Forged signatures on loan documents. You left the state." Silence. Griffin's jaw worked, but nothing came out. Renee's voice was small. "Who are they?" Griffin finally found words. "Past mistakes. Relationships that didn't work out. People exaggerate when they're angry. Nothing compared to what I'm about to play," I said. I tapped the tablet. The audio file loaded, and Renee's voice filled the dining room, bright and confident, recorded by the Ring doorbell she had forgotten existed. "Griffin, I know this sounds heartless, but think about it logically." Renee's fork clattered onto her plate. Her eyes went wide. "What if something happens while we're gone?" Griffin's voice careful and measured. "Dad has insurance. Whatever happens, we're covered. This Paris trip cost $15,000, Griffin. We can't just throw that money out the window. Dad would want us to go." Renee's face had gone the color of ash. She stared at the tablet like it was a weapon pointed at her chest. "And if it gets serious, we'll deal with it when we get back. He's 63, not 90. He'll be fine. This trip is our priority right now." And then her laugh. Light. Dismissive. The sound that had played on a loop in my mind for 3 weeks. The recording ended. The rain outside was the only sound. A soft, steady patter against the windows. Renee was shaking. "Where did you get that?" "My Ring doorbell," I said calmly. "The night before I collapsed. October 9th. You two sat in my living room and discussed my potential death like a cost-benefit analysis. You calculated whether $15,000 was worth risking my life." "I didn't mean it like that," Renee said, her voice breaking. We were just trying to be practical." "Practical," I repeated. "You didn't think I'd survive, or you didn't think I'd find out?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Griffin stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Robert, this is all a misunderstanding." "Sit down, Griffin." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The flatness of it, the utter absence of negotiation, made him sink back into his chair like a marionette with cut strings. I pulled a printed email from the folder and laid it on the table between them. "Frank Beaumont," I said. "Beaumont and Associates. A law office in downtown Paris, Paris. October 12th, 2 p.m. Does that ring a bell?" Griffin's jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind. "This isn't a vacation itinerary," I continued. "This is a consultation request for discrete asset transfers, offshore accounts, asset protection, which for those playing at home is a euphemism for hiding money from creditors, or in this case, from me." I slid the email toward Renee. She didn't touch it, just stared at it like it might bite. "While I was in the ICU, I said, you weren't sipping wine by the river. You were sitting in a lawyer's office signing paperwork to move my assets into accounts I couldn't access. You weren't on vacation. You were executing a heist." "Dad, no," Renee said, her voice desperate. "It wasn't like that. Griffin said it was just, he said we were protecting the family, planning for the future." "Griffin said," I echoed. "Griffin planned. But you went, Renee. You got on the plane. You attended the meeting. You shopped at Cartier and Louis Vuitton while I was on a ventilator, my heart held together with stents and prayers." I leaned forward. "That wasn't Griffin. That was you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. God. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'll fix it. I'll do anything. Please just tell me how to fix this." "How?" I asked. "Anything you want. I'll pay you back. Every cent. With what money, Renee?" She blinked, her mouth opening, closing. I let the question hang there, watching her brain work through the implications. Watching Griffin sit frozen in his chair, the confident charm he had worn like armor now cracked and useless. "You spent $47,000 in Paris," I said. "Hotel suites, designer clothes, Michelin star restaurants, jewelry, all on my credit card, while I was unconscious." Renee's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought I didn't think. You didn't think I'd check." I pulled out another document. The credit card statement highlighted in yellow. October 11th. The Grand Meridian Hotel, $12,400. October 13th. Louis Vuitton, $8,200. October 15th. Cartier, $6,500. I read each charge slowly, methodically. October 18th. A designer boutique, $9,300. The same day I was taken off the ventilator, Griffin finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "We can pay it back. We'll figure out a payment plan." "You can't," I said simply. "Because as of last Thursday, the bank reassigned the debt. Those charges were made while I was medically incapacitated, unauthorized. The liability has been transferred to the supplemental cardholder." I looked at Renee. "That's you." Her face crumpled. What? $47,328, I said. In your name now. Collections will start in 30 days. Griffin's chair scraped back again. You can't do that. I already did. He stared at me and I watched the calculation behind his eyes. The moment a predator realizes the trap has closed, that the prey he thought he was hunting had been hunting him all along. Renee was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. Dad, please. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I looked at her, at my daughter. The girl I had raised. The woman who had laughed at the thought of my death and felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty. Anything? I asked quietly. She nodded, desperate. I reached into the folder again. Good. Because evidence has levels, and we're only halfway through. There's a particular silence that comes after someone asks, with what money, and realizes they're about to learn exactly how much they've lost. I reached into the folder and pulled out the trust documents. Heavy paper, official letterhead, the kind of weight that comes from legal finality. 3 weeks ago, I said, I established the Miller-Brooks Family Trust. It includes this house, my retirement accounts, my savings, and your mother's inheritance. Total value $1.4 million. Renee's eyes went wide. Miller-Brooks? Who are? Harold Miller, I said. The neighbor who saved my life while you were shopping in Paris. Michael Brooks, the lawyer who donated blood while you were toasting champagne at the Windsor Grand Hotel. Her face crumpled. No, Dad, you can't. I already did. I slid the documents across the table. It's irrevocable. I'm the trustee during my lifetime, which means I control the assets. When I die, they pass directly to Harold and Michael. You get nothing. Griffin's chair scraped. Robert, you're angry. You're not thinking clearly. I'm not angry, I said. My voice was flat, empty of heat. Anger is an emotion. This is law. They're different things. I pulled out Margaret's letter next. The handwritten pages looked fragile in the candlelight, yellowed at the edges, but still legible. Your mother knew Renee, I said. 3 years ago, lying in that hospice bed, she knew what you were becoming. I read aloud. Not all of it, just the parts that mattered. I've set aside $250,000 for Renee from my inheritance, but it comes with a condition. She only gets it if she's there for you when you need her. I pray I'm wrong about her. But if I'm right, if she fails this test, then please, Robert, protect yourself. Renee was sobbing now, her hands over her face. Mom wrote that. She did, and she was right. I folded the letter carefully. She left you $250,000. The condition was simple: show up when I needed you. Be there. You weren't. The money reverted to me. It's in the trust now. You failed her test. I didn't know. You knew enough. I pulled out the credit card statement next. $47,328.19. The Windsor Grand Hotel. Louis Vuitton. Cartier. A designer boutique. All charged between October 10th and 20th. Renee's voice was small. You said I could use the card for emergencies, I said. Was the $6,500 Cartier bracelet an emergency? Griffin leaned forward. It's just money, Roberts. My money, I corrected, which I formally disputed with the bank on October 25th. Renee looked up, her face streaked with tears. Disputed. I slid the bank's response letter across the table. I filed a claim stating that all charges made between October 10th and 20th were unauthorized. The primary cardholder, me, was medically incapacitated, unconscious, unable to consent to transactions. I paused. The bank agreed. They've transferred the entire balance to the supplemental card holder as a personal debt. Renee picked up the letter with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the text. Personal debt means it's yours, I said. The bank classified them as unauthorized because I was medically incapacitated at the time, unable to consent or even know the charges were being made. Not mine. The bank will be contacting you. Collection agencies are very persistent, I'm told. I reached into my wallet, pulled out the credit card, the supplemental one with her name embossed on it, and picked up the kitchen scissors I'd left on the sideboard. I cut it in half, then in quarters. Accounts closed, I said. Griffin stood abruptly, his chair clattering backward. This is a personal vendetta. Sit down or leave, I said. But before you go, you should know I filed a whistleblower tip with the IRS 3 days ago about your offshore asset transfer conspiracy. With evidence, with your history, they'll find you. Griffin's face went through a rapid sequence: anger, calculation, fear. You have no proof. Frank Beaumont has proof, I said. The email he sent you was very detailed. The IRS loves patterns, Griffin. And you've got a pattern. Angela Carter and Patricia Kemp are very interested in seeing justice done too. I put them in touch with the right people. Griffin grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Renee, we're leaving. Renee looked at him, then at me, her face a mask of confusion and grief. Griffin, now, he snapped. One more thing, I said. The doorbell rang. I stood and walked to the front door, opened it. A woman in a gray suit stood on the porch holding a clipboard and a manila envelope. Renee Bryce, she asked, looking past me. Renee stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Yes, you've been served legal notice. The woman handed her the envelope, had her sign the clipboard, and left without another word. Renee opened the envelope with trembling hands. 3 documents slid out onto the table. I watched her unfold the first one. The Declaration of Disinheritance, notarized and stamped with the state seal. She read aloud, her voice breaking with every word. I, Robert James Bryce, of sound mind, and under no duress, formally and permanently, disinherit my daughter, Renee Margaret Bryce, from any claim, inheritance, or bequest from my estate, due to willful abandonment during a life-threatening medical emergency and credible evidence of financial conspiracy. She couldn't finish. The paper slipped from her hands. That's not just a letter, I said quietly. That's a legal document, witnessed by a notary public, filed with my will and the trust. You're not an heir. You're not a beneficiary. You're not named anywhere. I paused. You're no one. Griffin pulled Renee to her feet. She clutched the document, staring at my signature at the bottom of the page. The same signature that had been on her birth certificate 30 years ago had just signed her out of my life. Dad, she whispered. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't her dad anymore. Not legally. Not officially. Not in any way that mattered. They walked to the door. Griffin looked back once, and I saw it in his eyes, the plan already forming. He was going to run. From her, from this mess, from everything. She didn't know it yet, but she would. They'd met with Beaumont, paid the retainer, started the paperwork. But they hadn't moved any money yet. The trust locked everything down before they could. The door closed. I sat down at the table alone in the house that no longer legally belonged to me, but that I would live in for the rest of my days. The rain tapped against the windows, steady and rhythmic. I poured myself another glass of the $78 wine Griffin had bought with my money and raised it to the empty room. And then I exhaled. 3 weeks of holding my breath, and finally I could let go. They say you learn who people really are during a crisis. Griffin Sloan abandoned Renee exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after that Saturday dinner. He took what he could carry and vanished. I know this because Harold's Ring doorbell camera recorded it. I was home when Harold showed me the footage. 3 weeks had passed since Renee and Griffin had walked out of my house, and I hadn't heard from either of them directly. But Harold, ever the diligent neighbor, had been keeping an eye on their condo. "You need to see this," he said, pulling up his phone. The timestamp read December 1st, 3:07 a.m. The camera angle showed the parking lot of Renee's building. Griffin appeared hauling 2 suitcases, expensive ones probably bought in Paris, and loading them into his car. He moved quickly, efficiently, glancing over his shoulder twice. No lights came on in the condo windows. Renee didn't appear. Griffin got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. No goodbye. No note visible on the dashboard. Just gone. Harold paused the video. She called him 47 times the next day. I could hear her phone ringing through the walls. I set down my coffee. He was always going to leave. "You told her that?" "She didn't believe me." Harold put his phone away. "For what it's worth, I don't think she knew he was leaving. The way she was calling that wasn't anger. That was panic." "He's a professional," I said. Angela Carter and Patricia Kemp didn't see it coming either. There had been a voicemail, actually. 1. The day after our confrontation. I hadn't listened to it for 2 weeks, but when I finally did, her voice was small and shaking. "Dad, please. I know I messed up. Griffin says we can fix this. But I need to talk to you, please. I'm sorry." I had deleted it without calling back. Harold gave me updates over those 3 weeks. Week 1, collection agencies had started calling. Renee's phone rang constantly. He could hear it through the shared wall. Week 2, Griffin's car disappeared from the parking lot. Week 3, silence. A letter arrived from Lawrence Webb on November 28th. Robert, the IRS has officially opened an investigation into Griffin Sloan. Offshore asset transfers, tax evasion, possible elder financial abuse charges. His current whereabouts are unknown. Renee is cooperating with the investigation. Based on the evidence, there isn't enough to charge her. She appears to have been manipulated rather than a co-conspirator in the offshore scheme. However, her reputation has been significantly damaged, and the credit card debt remains her responsibility. The trust is finalized and filed. You're legally protected. Best. Lawrence, I folded the letter and set it aside. Michael Brooks visited on a Thursday afternoon. He brought coffee, the good kind, from a local roaster, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I heard what happened," he said carefully. "With your daughter. I'm sorry you had to go through all that." "Don't be sorry," I said. "I'm not." He blinked. "Still losing a daughter." "I lost my daughter 3 years before her mother died," I said. "I just didn't realize it until I died too." Michael was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "My dad used to say that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. Tom was a smart man. He learned it from you." Michael looked up. "About the trust. You don't have to include me. I know Harold saved your life, but I just donated blood. That's not—" "You gave me blood without knowing who I was," I interrupted. "You heard an emergency announcement and you showed up. That's more than family, Michael. That's humanity." His eyes were damp. He nodded once, didn't trust himself to speak. We sat there for a while, 2 men connected by loss and blood, literal and figurative, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not grief, not anger, peace. Dr. Rowan called the next day. "Your latest tests came back. Heart function is excellent. You're cleared for normal activity, work, exercise, travel, whatever you want." "Thank you," I said. "You sound good, Robert. Better than I expected." I feel good. I'm glad. She paused. For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of patients recover from cardiac events. The ones who do best are the ones who let go of the things that were killing them in the first place. I thought about that after we hung up. Harold came over for dinner Friday night. I made Margaret's beef stew, the recipe she'd perfected over 20 years, and we ate in comfortable silence for a while. Do you think she's okay? Harold asked finally. Renee. I set down my spoon. She will be. She's young. She'll figure out how to rebuild. Maybe that's the best thing I could give her, a reason to stand on her own. And Griffin. He'll run until someone stops him. The IRS maybe, or the next woman he tries to con. I shrugged. Not my problem anymore. Harold studied me. What about you? I'm getting there. That night, alone in my house, the one that legally belonged to a trust, but felt more mine than it ever had, I found myself thinking about Margaret. Not the sad thoughts. Not the grief that had defined the first 3 years after her death. Gratitude. She had tried to build a wall to protect me. The trust, the conditional inheritance, the letter she'd written, knowing I might not read it for years. She had seen what I refused to see, and she had done everything she could to shield me from this pain. She had failed. The pain had come anyway. But in failing, she had taught me something I hadn't understood until now. Love isn't letting people hurt you just because you share blood. Love is protecting yourself so you can love the people who deserve it. Harold, who had sat in an ICU waiting room for a week. Michael, who had donated blood for a stranger because his father had taught him to show up. Dr. Rowan, who had kept my heart beating when it wanted to stop. I poured a glass of whiskey, the good stuff, the Scotch whiskey Margaret had bought for our 30th anniversary, and raised it to her photo on the mantel. You were right, I said aloud, and I finally listened. The house was quiet. The rain had stopped. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was home. I'd spent 30 Thanksgivings as a father. This would be the first as something else, something I was still learning to name. The turkey was small, 12 pounds, enough for 4 with leftovers. I'd bought it Tuesday, brined it overnight the way Margaret had taught me, and spent Thursday morning prepping the same way I'd done for 3 decades. Stuffing. Mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. The rituals were the same. The people would be different. Harold arrived first, carrying a pie in a glass dish covered with foil. Emma's pumpkin pie, he said, setting it on the counter. Her recipe. Figured it was time to use it again. I looked at the pie, the careful crimped edges, the way Harold had remembered to vent the top crust in Emma's signature star pattern. She'd be glad you did, I said. Harold nodded, his eyes damp. Yeah, I think she would. Michael arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a bottle of wine and a grin so wide it looked like it might split his face. Wine, he said, handing it over. And I passed the bar exam. I set the bottle down and pulled him into a hug. A real one, the kind I used to give Renee when she came home with good report cards before everything went wrong. Michael, I said. That's wonderful. Your dad would be so proud. I know. His voice was thick. I wish he could see it. He can, I said. I'm sure of it. The doorbell rang again. Dr. Rowan stood on the porch, holding a bottle of Chardonnay and looking uncertain. I wasn't sure this was appropriate, she said. You were my patient and you saved my life, I interrupted. If that's not appropriate for Thanksgiving, I don't know what is. Come in. She smiled, relieved, and stepped inside. We sat around the table, the same one where I'd confronted Renee and Griffin 3 weeks ago, and it felt completely different. Harold told stories about Emma, about the Thanksgivings they'd hosted, when their kids were young, before the kids moved to California, and the holidays became quieter. Michael talked about foster care, about Thanksgivings in group homes with box lunches and volunteers who tried too hard to make everything festive. The mashed potatoes always came from a box, he said, laughing, and the turkey was always dry. But we were grateful anyway. Dr. Rowan Pamela, she'd insisted I call her shared, that she usually worked Thanksgiving. Someone has to staff the ICU, she said. And I didn't have anywhere else to be. This is nice. I raised my glass. To good things. To good things, they echoed. We ate. We passed dishes. We laughed. Harold told a story about Emma burning a turkey so badly, the smoke alarm went off, and the fire department showed up. Michael shared about his first case as a licensed attorney, helping a single dad win custody of his daughter. Pamela talked about a patient she'd saved last week, a teenage girl who'd coded in the ER and walked out 3 days later. Halfway through the meal, Harold set down his fork. Have you heard from, He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. No, I said, and I don't expect to. Harold hesitated. I saw her at the grocery store last week. She looked tired. She's working retail now. Fred Meyer, I think. I felt something shift in my chest. Not satisfaction, not pity, just closure. She made her choices, I said. She'll have to live with them. Michael looked at me, his expression thoughtful. Is it wrong that I'm grateful not for the betrayal, but for this? For being here? No, I said. I'm grateful too. Pamela set down her wine glass. I see a lot of people survive cardiac events. Most of them survive, but they don't really live. You're living, Robert. I died twice, I said. Seems wasteful not to make this life meaningful. After dinner, we cleaned up together. Harold washed dishes. Michael dried. Pamela wrapped leftovers. I made coffee and sliced Emma's pie, which was perfect, sweet and spiced, and everything a Thanksgiving dessert should be. As we worked, Harold mentioned almost casually, there's an arrest warrant out for Griffin. They found him in Nevada. He's awaiting extradition. I paused the coffee pot in my hand. Good. Angela and Patricia deserve justice. Michael looked up from drying a plate. What about Renee? She made her choices, I repeated. She cooperated with the IRS. She's not facing charges, but she'll have to live with the rest. The evening wound down slowly. We sat in the living room full and content, talking about nothing important. Harold's plans to repaint his kitchen, Michael's new apartment, Pamela's upcoming trip to visit her sister in Colorado. At the door, Michael hugged me again. Same time next year, I said. After they left, I found a card tucked under the pie dish. The handwriting was neat, feminine. I opened it. Heard you're doing well. Proud of you. A nurse, Alicia. I hadn't seen her since I'd been discharged, but she'd remembered. I stuck the card on the fridge next to the photo of Margaret. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification appeared. I played the first second just long enough to hear Renee's voice, small and tentative, and deleted it without listening. I felt nothing. Not curiosity, not guilt, not anger, just freedom. I stood in the kitchen, the same spot where I'd collapsed 7 weeks ago, and realized I didn't care what the voicemail said. I didn't need to hear her apology, her explanation, her plea. Whatever she had to say, it didn't matter anymore. Margaret had told me once that forgiveness wasn't for the other person. It was for yourself. A way to let go of the weight you'd been carrying, so you could move forward. I didn't know if I'd forgiven Renee. Maybe I had. Maybe I hadn't. Maybe it didn't matter. But I'd forgiven myself. For being blind. For hoping when I should have seen. For loving someone who couldn't love me back. And that was enough. I poured the last of the wine, raised my glass to the empty kitchen, and said aloud, "Thank you. For Harold, who had saved my life. For Michael, who had given me his blood. For Pamela, who had kept my heart beating. For Margaret, who had tried to protect me even from the grave. For this second chance. This unexpected, hard-won, perfectly imperfect life." Set the glass in the sink and turned off the lights. Tomorrow I would wake up in a house that wasn't legally mine but felt more like home than it ever had. I would call Michael and congratulate him again. I would have coffee with Harold and maybe help him pick out paint colors. I would live, not survive. Live. And that I thought was the best revenge of all. 6 months after dying twice, I moved to a townhouse 3 blocks from Harold. Smaller space, bigger life. The old house sold to a young family with kids and a golden retriever. The townhouse had 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for Michael, who stayed most weekends now. Harold helped me unpack the last boxes on a Saturday morning in April. "This is good, Robert," he said. "Really good." "Feels right," I said. Michael and I had settled into a rhythm. I taught him about investing. He taught me about technology. Reciprocal. Easy. The way families should be. My 6-month checkup with Dr. Rowan came back clean. "Your heart is healthier than it's been in years," she said. "I'm living smaller," I told her. "Feels like I'm living bigger." Saturday mornings, Harold and I walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks away. "Emma would have liked this," he said one morning. "2 old fools drinking coffee." "I'm not that old," I said. "You died twice." Fair point. Harold updated me on Renee sometimes. She was a manager at Fred Meyer, now living in a small apartment, paying down her debt. She was seeing someone, a high school math teacher. A normal guy. "She asks about you," Harold said. "What do you say, Watumu?" "That you're happy." And, she said that's good. She's glad for you. I felt something shift. Not anger. Just a small, cautious hope that maybe she'd learned something. Griffin had been sentenced in February. 4 years federal prison. Angela Carter and Patricia Kemp received partial restitution. I didn't go to the sentencing. It wasn't my closure to claim. Michael came over one evening with the annual trust evaluation. "Everything's protected," he said. Then leaning against the counter, "You're basically my dad. You know that, right?" I looked up, startled. "Legally, I'm a blood donor and beneficiary," he continued. "But emotionally, yeah, you're my dad." I stood and pulled him into a hug. It was the first time anyone had called me dad in 6 months. It meant something different now, something earned. That evening I sat on the porch watching the sunset. I thought about Margaret, about the wall she'd tried to build to protect me. "Got it right this time," I said aloud. That night I lay in my new bedroom in my new house. No machines beeping, no ghosts haunting. Just silence. The good kind, the kind that comes after storms. I thought about the man who had died that Thursday night, the man who'd been afraid of being alone. That man was gone. The man who came back knew the difference between being alone and being lonely. I wasn't lonely, not at all. People who know this story ask me if I'd do anything differently, if I'd give Renee a chance, if I've forgiven her now. I tell them the truth. I don't think about Renee anymore. I think about the people who showed up. They say near death gives you clarity. That's not quite right. Death gives you priorities. And I learned mine. Harold saved my life. He heard a noise through the wall and acted. That's family. Michael gave blood without knowing who I was. That's humanity. Renee shared my DNA. We shared 30 years. But she wasn't there when it mattered. That's biology. And biology isn't family. My wife knew what I couldn't see. Love must be nurtured even from children, especially from children. She tried to protect me with her trust, her conditions, her letter from the grave. She knew Renee had stopped nurturing years before I noticed. I spent 30 years building an estate for someone who saw it as inheritance, not gift. I've spent 6 months building a life with people who see me as a person, not a bank account. Saturday mornings, Harold and I drink coffee and argue about baseball. Michael comes over Sundays and we cook dinner together. Dr. Rowan joins us sometimes. So does Alessia, the ICU nurse who held my hand when Renee was in Paris. Last week, Michael asked if I regretted having children. I told him no. I just regret not seeing sooner that the child I raised stopped being my daughter long before she stopped calling me dad. I died twice. Heart stopped. Flatline. You want to know what I saw? Nothing. No light. No tunnel. No deceased relatives beckoning. Just darkness. And then Dr. Rowan's voice. Stay with me. I stayed. Not for Renee. Not for the house or the money or the life I'd built. I stayed because some part of me wasn't done yet. Turns out I stayed for this. For Harold's terrible jokes. For teaching Michael about compound interest. For knowing the difference between people who love you and people who love what you give them. I visit Margaret's grave once a month. I plant flowers, pull weeds, tell her about Harold and Michael, about the townhouse, about being happy. I don't tell her about Renee. She already knows. I'm 63 years old. If I'm lucky, I've got 20 good years left. 30 if I'm very lucky. I'm not spending them angry. I'm not spending them wishing Renee were different. I'm spending them with the people who chose me and who I chose back. That's what death taught me. Life's too short to waste on people who wouldn't cancel their vacation when your heart stopped beating. God gives us second chances for a reason. Mine taught me that family betrayal revenge isn't about destroying others, it's about protecting yourself. This family revenge story showed me the hardest truth sometimes. The people you raise become strangers who see you as assets, not family. Don't be like me. Don't wait until your heart stops twice to see who really loves you. Don't spend 30 years building wealth for people who measure you in dollars. Don't ignore the signs when family betrayal revenge becomes necessary because love has already died. Here's what I learned from this family revenge story. Biology creates relatives. Loyalty creates family. Harold and Michael chose me when Renee chose Paris. That's the difference. My advice, protect yourself legally before crisis hits. Trust actions, not words. And remember, family betrayal, revenge isn't about winning. It's about surviving with dignity intact. If this family revenge story moved you, please comment below. Have you faced betrayal from loved ones? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories about resilience and second chances. Thank you for staying until the end. Disclaimer: future stories contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't suitable, please exit and choose alternative content.